to conferences all the time is the main driver for progress in your skill set and also your relationship, and basically any professional can become a better professional by attending conferences.
It's not the standard, okay? It's a movie theater, but the visual is great and the sound is great, and I've seen a lot of room and space, and I think it's organized well.
Seeing all the people here today and they're excited about stuff, and you can see the energy and the desire to learn and do new things.
And I was positively surprised about the depth, the technical depth of the sessions, and how that makes the tester part of the team.
I think developers do benefit from coming to QA conferences, just the same as testers can benefit from going to dev conferences. You've got to have a broad understanding of what's going on.
It's really inclusive. I would say it's super diverse. People are really open and friendly, and it's really organized.
Conferences are well worthwhile just for the ideas that they spark in people. When people come back to the office, they're full of ideas and they're all energized up.
Hi, my name is Bjorn Boisschot and I work for a company called CTG. We're located in Belgium, and probably you guys know Belgium from the good waffles, the beer, French fries, the chocolates, but it's also the birthplace of a term called DevOps. And yes, you guessed it right, my talk is going to be on DevOps, more specifically on how it has impacted testing and how we as testers can actually leverage from the different benefits from DevOps. So hope to see you soon in Vilnius. Bye.
Now, let's start with my presentation. I'm going to start with a little historical facts on testing. First of all, we had the year 1979. 1979 was the year that Sony released their first ever Walkman. And this was really a milestone in the history of how people listen to music, because this was the first time that anybody was able to listen to music while they were on the move. But 1979 was also the year that the first book called The Art of Software Testing was released. This is actually one of the first books that's talking on our software profession in detail. It was written by a person called Glenford Myers, and this book really set the foundation for what modern software testing is all about today. He introduced concepts such as black box testing, the economics of software testing, and many others. And then we had 1986. 1986 was the year that Nintendo released their first Nintendo Entertainment System on the world. I think, like most of you know, that this console has really become one of the most loved consoles in gaming history. I personally remember spending quite some hours playing Mario Bros, Zelda, Metroid, and all of these other great Nintendo tools. And for the people that paid a lot of attention to my introduction movie, you could have seen that there was an arcade cabinet standing behind me, just to indicate you I'm a real gaming addict. But 1986 was also the year that the V model was introduced. And this model demonstrates the relationship between each phase of the development lifecycle and its associated phases of testing. And the V model is also the starting point for a lot of companies to actually set up a more structured approach to software testing. So this is for a lot of companies like the starting ground of their software testing practices. And then we have 2001. In 2001, the Human Genome Project was released and publicly accessible on the internet. And this has been a real milestone for us as human beings in order to discover more about ourselves. It's actually the first time we could look at our building blocks. Now, in 2001, there was also a bunch of people that went skiing in Utah, and was kind of a bad weather and decided to do something else. And I think we all know what came out of that skiing trip. It was actually the Agile Manifesto. I think most of you know that this was going to be a real game changer for the complete software development industry, but also for us in testing. Because now quality was not anymore the responsibility of the testers, it became the responsibility of the complete team. And next to this, because of the short iterations of Agile, we tend to spend more attention and more effort into test automation. So the Agile manifesto really changed a lot for us testers. Now we have 2009. 2009 was the year that the first Bitcoin ever was mined. And this is really going to revolutionize the way our finances system work. I think we all know that Bitcoin has a potential to disrupt the entire world when we look at finances. But in 2009, we saw another big disruption. It was actually the first time that the DevOps days were organized. And these first DevOps days were organized in the city of Ghent in Belgium. And this is why I also said that the guy who actually organized this was Patrick Dubois, who is also the person that coined the term DevOps. So that's why I'm, as a Belgian, pretty proud that we also invented the term DevOps. But anyway, this conference really popularized the software development method we now know as DevOps, that is focusing a lot on the collaboration and integration between software development and operations people. And then we have 2011. As you can see here, 2011 is marked in orange. Why? Well, this was a sad year. It is the year that Apple's co-founder Steve Jobs died. And as you all know, Jobs was responsible of a disruption of a multitude of industries, going from music to movies to computers to telephones, tablets, and practically any industry out there. But 2011 was also a sad year for us testers, because this is the year that in which Alberto Savoia is the first one to actually state that testing is dead. And he did this during his opening keynote at the Google Test Automation Conference. So imagine there's a test automation conference, or there's a conference like this one, and the opening keynote person actually starts his presentation with the fact that testing is dead. Right. What he actually said is that the traditional way we are doing software testing is dead or on the decline. But this is really a game changer for us in the software testing industry. So in 32 years, we went from the first dedicated book on our testing profession to a more structured process with the V model, to more emphasis that testing is a team responsibility, to the merger of the dev and the ops teams, to the first guy telling us that our profession is dead. This is really a heavy journey we went through. This is not something traditional or standard. This is in 32 years from we are alive, we have a book that's naming us as a profession, to we're actually out of a job and testing is dead. So it's also normal that this is a point where a lot of test professionals became worried for their jobs. We started hearing, next to Alberto Savoia's statement, we started hearing rumors from big tech companies telling us that, hey, we fired all of our testers. We don't need any testers anymore. We actually replaced testers by these big robots with arms hitting the keyboard because, yeah, that's what testers do. They just hit a keyboard. It's like monkeys pressing buttons. So we started hearing all of these rumors from these big tech companies, and in general, these companies were in kind of an agile / DevOps transformation. So what happened is that a lot of testers started blaming this testing is dead movement on the introduction of DevOps. But now, if we look closer at one of the definitions of DevOps, and this is just one by Gene Kim, who's by accident one of my favorite authors, but anyway, I'm not going to read through the definition, but if we look at this definition, DevOps is all about continuous improvement, faster releases, faster feedback, improved quality, improving value. If I look at this, I'm actually reading testing, 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 testing. So for me, DevOps is certainly not the reason that people were starting to say, hey, testing is dead. Now, if DevOps is not the reason, let's look at ourselves. What about testing? What did we do the last 20 years in order to evolve our profession? Yes, we've invested quite some more money and time in test automation, usually on the graphic user interface. We've matured some of our testing processes. But if we're honest, if you ask me personally, I think we're still trying to play catch up and trying to understand how to adjust and adapt to this new reality. And it struck me quite a lot when I was looking back at the talk Testing is Dead. In this talk, at a certain point in time, James Whittaker stated that if we would take a tester from the 70s and we would teleport him back into a project, ask him to test, that this wouldn't be a problem at all. This guy or person would actually be able to do testing as we're doing today. So this actually means that our profession didn't really change that much during the last few decades. Now, based on these facts, I think we shouldn't be surprised that people were questioning the traditional ways of testing. So what I think we need to do in order to survive is, instead of remaining a reactive activity, I think we need to ensure that we become a proactive strategy. And now the way to do this is, it will become crucial for us to understand how we as testing can deliver real value. And it's not only delivering value to the end customer, but it's really adding value in the complete software development chain. And adding value means adding value to our development colleagues, to our operations colleagues, to our management, to our business, to anybody involved in the complete software development lifecycle. And in some cases, I think testing will even become a more supportive function to others than we are today. Now, how do we do this? Well, personally, I created actually 4 major points on which I think we need to focus on. The first point is, we need to change the way that people are seeing testing. It's not a task anymore performed by some individuals. It's neither a task performed by the whole team. I think we should look at it as a real strategy. Now, and in order to do so, I think first of all, we need to take up the task to teach developers why testing is so important and how they can easily contribute to it. And the first thing I want to talk about when I say coaching developers is unit testing. If we look at unit testing, I think most developers now are performing some kind of unit test. They understand that it's important, but in generally, they're still focusing quite a lot on the happy parts. And as testers, I think we need to teach them that they need to look at negative test cases, to use boundary value analysis, to determine the different ins and outs. I think this is really an important step there. And I have a very concrete example. I was working on a project a few years ago in an agile team, and as a technical tester actually, and at a certain point in time, I asked the developers, hey guys, can I look at your unit tests? I don't really have anything useful to do today. I want to do a review of your unit tests. And they said, well, no problem, Bjorn, here are our unit tests. Go ahead and look at them. You just need to know that we were creating a software package in which people, when they enter their age, their sex, and the place they lived, we would calculate a fee they need to pay for an insurance. So that's in short what we did. And when I was looking at the unit tests, I saw that the developers always used the same inputs. They always used pretty much like a male 40 years old living in the center of Brussels, for example. And then I started reading through them and asked them, hey, why didn't you ever use like a male of 0 years old, or a female of minus 500 years old, a male of 250 years old? And they started looking at me and very strangely and telling me like, hey, but it doesn't exist. There is no male of minus 500 years old. There is no female of plus 500 years old. It's plain, it doesn't exist in the world. But then I started explaining them, hey, but our graphic user interface asks people to fill in their age, and we're not actually limiting what they're filling in. So they can fill in garbage. And by definition, people will do so. And you in your unit tests, you should check on, okay, what happens if we fill in minus 500? What happens if we fill in 0? Will we get like an error in your functionality? And this really made them understand that, hey, yeah, perhaps it's interesting to actually look at these different inputs and outputs and use functions like boundary value analysis. And next, in coaching the developers, I think we're also perfect in assisting them in the creation of performance tests. In general, developers are great at creating performance scripts. They're very technical, they can create a very good performance script. But if we look at the performance test, the performance scenario, in which we're going to define, okay, these are the different performance scripts we're going to run. This is the number of data we're going to use. This is the ramp up, ramp down of users. We need to have these batch jobs running in order to actually create this complete performance scenario, performance test. This is something where we as testers are pretty good at because we have a great helicopter overview. The developers in general are very narrow-minded in what they know on the application, on the complete context. So as testers, I think we can really add a lot of value there. And last but not least, a system in setting up a great pipeline. What generally happens is that the developers already have their CI pipeline. We have a bunch of automated graphic user interface tests, and at a certain point in time, we decide to merge both of them. Now, important for a tester to understand is that a CI pipeline is there to get fast feedback, as fast as possible. Now, if we have a set of regression tests that take, for example, 4 hours to execute, well, the fast feedback is gone. It's becoming slow feedback. So as testers, we need to understand that, okay, we have our set of regression tests, but the developers want to have fast feedback. So do anything that is possible in order to get that fast feedback. So start parallelizing test runs, start dividing your complete regression set into smaller sets so we run less amount of tests but get this feedback faster. So try to talk with the developers and figure out, okay, how can we make sure that we can get that feedback as fast as possible to the developers. Next to coaching the developers, I think we also need to do a better job at coaching business. And coaching business is pretty simple. It all starts with helping them to define great and smart acceptance criteria. And we really need to teach them that if they do this, it will make their lives and everybody's lives in the software development lifecycle more easy. It will, if they have smart acceptance criteria, developers actually know what to develop against. Testers know exactly how to test the delivered features. And at the end, the business knows what they can use to accept or reject the software. So having these smart acceptance criteria is really crucial for a project. And I think we can really help the business and coach them into creating these in a better fashion. And next to that, also review user stories more. As testers, as I explained before, we have a great helicopter overview. We know everything involved in a project. So I think we're also the ideal candidates to actually review the user stories that are created by the business. And this will help us in finding defects more faster in actually the complete change. So it's kind of also a shift lefty thing, but then on a business point of view. And last but not least, we can help them understand and define all of the different personas that are using our software. It seems strange, but as testers, we have like a very super skill. If you guys know comic books like The Avengers or whatever, or Superman, well, we as testers, we also have a super skill. And for me, our super skill is that we can take our brain, we can take the brain of an end user, we can actually merge these two together and put that brain again in our head. And this actually allows us to look at an application and use our testing knowledge and use the knowledge we have as a specific persona. And with these two combined, I think we can help the business in optimizing and letting them understand their different personas. So in order to do all of this, I think we need to understand that we need to have good collaboration. And in order to have good collaboration, we need to create an environment of trust. This is like crucial. And trust is something that can be cultivated. It needs to be cultivated. And it's pretty easy, actually. And the first thing we need to do in order to cultivate trust is something I call coffee, 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 and cakes. If you want to ask something at a developer, just go over there, ask him or her to take a cup of coffee, and also talk about some non-work related stuff. Why do I tell you this? Well, this actually gets you bonding. That this makes a bond between you and the developer. If you created some cakes or some cupcakes at home And if you have some spare left, well, take them with you to your company, send out a mail and say, hey, I have some cakes at my desk. If you feel hungry, come by, grab one. Again, why? Well, again, people come by, start talking to you about non-related work stuff, and you start bonding. You start to create a bond. You start to get to know each other. And the next thing is have empathy with the developers. We are often the bringers of bad news. We are actually going over to the developer and telling them that their newly born baby is ugly and has some serious problems. We need to understand this. So if you find a bug and you go over to the developer and you do like, you stupid developer, you created a nasty bug. Well, they're not going to like you. It's normal. So if you go over to the developer, first of all, bring a cup of coffee. And if you have some cakes. But second of all, have empathy with them. Tell the problem or tell the bug in a nice way to the developer. And last but not least, celebrate success. I think most of you know celebrate success by if we have a successful go live, we go out, we eat something, we drink a lot of beer, we actually get drunk, and it's nice because everybody starts knowing each other. And to be very honest, it's very important, and you need to do that. Okay, the getting drunk stuff, it's up to you to decide if you do this or not, but celebrating that way is important. But we also need to celebrate other things. We need to be happy with small things. For example, if a developer creates their first unit test ever, go over, congratulate them. If they find a bug that you haven't found before, well, go over and be humble and say like, hey, great guys, you found a defect I overlooked as a tester. This is awesome, you did this. So actually celebrate small successes also. Now, in order to do all of these, there is one thing we need, and it's called soft skills. And this is something I blame a lot of managers for. When they're assembling a team, in general, they're all looking at hard skills. They're looking at, we need to have a Kubernetes expert, we need to have a Helm scripter, we need to have a Selenium guy, we need to have a Go developer, a Python developer, I don't know. They're always looking at hard skills. And they're never telling us, hey, I need to have a bridge builder in the team. I need to have someone who can bring fun. And also need to have somebody on whose shoulder people can cry if they have some problems. So these soft skills are also crucially important when creating a team. And to be very honest, a soft skill is something that is harder to teach or harder to get better at than a hard skill. So please, if you need to assemble a team, also look at the soft skills. It's kind of crucial. Now, a next big thing to actually focus on is, as testers, we shouldn't be afraid of DevOps. We should actually embrace some of the techniques and use these for our own purposes. Now, what do I mean by this? I think, okay, most of you know this. I know it's a hypey word. I know it's a little bit bloated, but it is partially true. When nothing goes right, go left. And this is what we call the shift left. As testers, we will need to become more technical. We need to understand the technical context of our applications, but we don't need to become as good as developers as our development colleagues. We don't need to learn to write code the same way they do, because then we actually shift to a different role. But remember the first slide about trust. This is really a way of building trust with developers. We need to become more technical. And in order to demonstrate you this, I have a great example I encountered last year, just 2 years ago, in a project I was working as a coach. And one of the things I noticed was that the defects that were created by our technical testers were fixed or were taken up faster by the developers than the tests that were created by our non-technical testers. And I went over to our development lead, John, and I asked John, okay, what's happening here? Why is this? I can't understand it. And John told me like, hey, Bjorn, this is normal. You know what's happening? Your technical tester, he finds a problem. He logs into the Unix machine, goes to the log file, tries to find whatever happened. He finds a stack trace. He's actually Googling that stack trace. He's trying to figure out what's actually going wrong. And then he goes over to the developer, of course, takes a cup of coffee and a piece of cake, but John didn't really tell me that, but I hope they did. So he goes over to the developer And he starts talking to the developer and says, hey, I found this problem. I looked it up on Google. I think it has something to do with the database connection. I'm not pretty sure. Could you please look into it? I already created the bug in Jira, but could you look into it and could you explain me what actually went wrong? So what's actually happening here is because this technical tester figured it out and assembled everything, goes over and talks to the developer realizes like, hey, that guy speaks the same language as I do. He understands what I'm doing. He's trying to figure out what actually happened. So they actually start kind of bonding. And the developer, the next time he sees a defect being created by that technical tester, is going to go like, hey, I know that guy. He understands me. We're pretty much the same way of thinking. So I'm going to take up that defect first because yeah, I like the guy. So this is actually what's happening. Just because we become more technical and we speak the same language, we actually start bonding better. We have better collaboration again. And the last thing here is if we're creating automated tests, and if you have the option, please use the same development language as your developers are using to create your application. Sometimes technically it's not possible, but if it is possible, just do this. Why? Because this will make sure that they can actually help us when we have a problem. If you are using VB Script as an automation language and the developers are using Java to create their application, no way in hell that they will ever help you in figuring out a problem you're having. So this is also something pretty simple that can help you in this collaboration aspect. Now, the second part in the DevOps movement, I think, yeah, containerization is certainly one of the hot topics these days. And as testers, we can really, really benefit a lot from a containerized setup of our application and the test. As an example, the bank I was working for, I think 2 or 3 years ago, they were in the middle of creating a new application platform, and it was actually it was componentized in different microservices, all working together. And one of the things they actually asked me was, okay, we want to see what's happening if the payment service goes down. As you can see here in the middle, we have all of the different services. We have the payment service. On the left side, we have everybody using this platform. Now, they wanted to know if the payment service goes down, what happens? Is the bank losing money? Is the customer losing money? Or is the system recovering and is everything working as it should be? Now, if we wanted to test this on our traditional testing environment, then kicking out this payment service would actually hinder everybody in our team. And when I say everybody in our team, it's actually everybody in all of the teams of the bank, meaning think around 100 people that would possibly be interfered with when they were doing their tests. So it was certainly something we couldn't do quite often. So I went over with the architects and the developers, talked to them, explained the problem, explained what we actually needed. And they said, well, in this case, it's pretty simple for us to actually spin up a dedicated environment for you. It will take us a few days to actually configure everything because we've containerized everything, but we still need a few days to make sure that everything is working as it should be. And we can actually spin up an environment for you to do these tests. And this is what we actually did. They created a dedicated environment for me or for our team to kick out the payment service as much as I wanted. And of course, the advantages there is we don't interfere with anybody else. But next to that, the only traffic I saw passing by on this complete system was my transactions. So it was much easier to figure out what went wrong on this environment than on the traditional one. And what we also noticed is that this is actually an ideal environment to do all of our automated testing on. So we actually afterwards spin up a complete dedicated test automation environment in which we controlled all of the data, which is like the greatest heavenly thing you can think of if you look at test automation. And then code quality. For me, this is a crucial one. And normally, if I'm in, I would have been on a big stage in Vilnius, damn you, COVID crisis. But anyway, if I will be on stage, I would ask everybody, do you think that this is a beautiful bathroom? And would you like to have this tomorrow in your home? And if I would ask the same thing here now online, and I would like to ask a raise of hands, I suppose that most of you would say, yeah, this is a great bathroom, and I would immediately install it tomorrow in my home. But now, if we look at the back end of this bathroom, this is actually the plumbing of our bathroom. So I think most of you will also immediately understand that if something is wrong in our bathroom, if we need to, if one of the pipes get blocked, that if we hire somebody to figure out which pipe is blocked, well, it will cost a lot of money. It will be very expensive. It will take quite some time to actually figure this out. And this is exactly the same in software testing. But in software testing, we're calling these things technical depth, code smells, code coverage. It's not about the pipes, but it all has to do with code quality. And code quality for me is an aspect on which we as testers are not yet focusing enough on. Of course, technical depth, code smells, code coverage is something within the responsibility of the pure developers. But as testers within an Agile or DevOps team, these are crucial metrics. If I receive a new version, or if we as testers, we as a team, we receive a new version of our application, and if I could have a look at the code coverage, for example, and I would see that there is like 90% code coverage on module A and 10% code coverage on module B, then of course I'm going to focus more on module B because it has less unit tests being executed against it. So the probability of finding a problem in module B is probably higher than in module A. Of course, we need to know what module A and B is. We also need to know, that's why code coverage is in orange. We need to understand which kind of code coverage is calculated because there's different kinds of code coverage, meaning that we can go from branch to statement to line coverage to decision coverage. If you're interested in code coverage, read on it on Google or ask me separate questions. But code coverage is an important metric, but one to know what you're looking at. But the same for code smells. It's something I think as QA or testers, we also need to indicate on a project level, hey guys, we see that there's quite some code smells. We see that our technical depth is getting pretty heavy. Isn't it the moment to actually do something about it? So I would really encourage you all to, if you're working in a project, to take a bigger look at these code quality metrics. And then we have my third point I want to focus on, leveraging production more. Sometimes it really seems to me that we're actually afraid of our production environment. It's kind of like a nuclear no-go zone that nobody ever can touch. Now, the biggest advantage of DevOps is that we're actually bringing the dev and the ops teams together. And this should make it really much easier for us to get access to the rich world of production data. Now, if we look at the past, if as testers we needed to get some information on how is our application being used, which are the defects being reported in production, we needed to look at incident reports, shortcoming surveys, reviews, user feedback, all of that kind of information that operations teams are asking our customers in production. But now in this new age, thanks to again a merge of dev and ops teams, we can have a much more easy access to all of this data from production. And one small side note, I'm not going to go into details on this one because it's something for a completely different kind of congress. But when I'm saying more easy, it's technically more easy to get access to this data. But these days, because of GDPR and other data privacy regulations, sometimes it becomes more difficult because of the regulation aspects. But again, that's something for a completely different topic and Congress. Now, what can we do with all of these metrics and this data from production? I have some very concrete examples for you of what we did in the past for some projects. First of all, for one project was a financial customer. We actually used user journeys to tweak our testing strategy. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, this customer in their operations teams, they were using an application performance management tool. In this case, it was Dynatrace, but doesn't matter which tool you're using, but just so the people perhaps can make a link between what APM is. And they use this tool, and what they actually were able to do is they were able to trace a user's journey through the application. So meaning that they could see, okay, user A is starting in screen A, is going to screen B, C, D, E, F, G. He's using all of this different data, and this is where they're actually exiting our application or system. Now, I noticed this by talking to the operations people. Actually, to be very honest, I'm not encouraging everybody, but yeah, I'm a smoker, so I went out to smoke a cigarette, talk to the ops guys, and actually figured out the way they were doing this. And I thought to myself, hey, but this would be great if we could also benefit from this on our non-production environment. So what we did is we actually captured the user journeys from production. We did the same thing on our testing environment, and then we actually started comparing both of them. And we started to see that there were some scenarios that our end users in production were doing that we never did in our regression sets. And we saw that there was an awful lot of scenarios in our regression sets that nobody in production ever did. And based on this comparison, we actually optimized, tweaked, and changed our regression set and kicked out some tests and entered some new tests. And then for another customer, and this is a situation I think for most of the customers we have, is when we're creating performance tests, in general, if we look at the performance scenarios, if we look at, okay, how we're going to create them, in general, it's still like, I don't know if you say this in English, but wet finger guessing, like, oh, I think it will be 2,000 transactions with 500 users doing these transactions. This is the load that's going to happen. These are the batch jobs. So we try to define this as good as possible, but in general, we're still guessing a little bit. Now, because we actually merge the operations and the development people into one team, we can actually ask our operations people. We can ask operations, hey, what is the exact load we're getting in production? What are the exact number of transactions, scenarios, response times? Please give us all of this detailed information. And this will allow us to create more fine-grained performance tests. And last but not least, crash reporting. This was actually for a pharmaceutical customer we had. They had a solution in place. They were actually creating a mobile app, and the solution they had allowed them to see all of the crash reports, the error reports in their app in production. So what actually happened is that if they were tracking users through the different screens, if an error happened, then automatically an incident was created. There was like a movie and screenshots of, I think, the 5 minutes before the incident happened, and there was also capture of the log file at that point in time. And we're sending an incident report to the operations team. Now, when I noticed this, I thought to myself, hey, but we are doing exploratory testing as part of our testing strategy, and I can never remember what I actually did 5 minutes ago. So why don't we use the same tool in our test environment while we're doing exploratory testing? Because it actually sends out a complete detailed report of what I've just done, what the error message is, together with like the log file and some screenshots. So this allowed us to quickly create very detailed defects based on our exploratory tests. And this is something we actually borrowed from the operations team. And then I'm going to be very honest on this one. Experimentation, very important, very useful, and also very interesting. Personally, I don't have a lot of experience in this one, but I would love to get more experienced in. So what I'm going to explain you now is more based on what I've read than what I've actually done until now. But this is really an area where a lot of big DevOps players are focusing on. And I think one of the most known examples of one of these experimentation methods, in this case, we're going to talk about A/B testing, is what is called the 40 Shades of Blue by Google. Now, what happened is Google was using two different kinds of shade of blue, and they wanted to figure out which one would be the best color of blue. Now, a normal company would say, hey, let's hire a UX designer. Let's ask somebody who knows everything about user experience, which is the best color of blue. Google said, no. We are not a normal company, so we're not going to do this. What we're going to do is we're going to give 40 different shades of blue to all of our, or to a specific number of our visitors. And then we're going to track what we call the conversion rate or the click-through of each of these colors of blue. So we're going to see if people who get color of blue 30 get more click-throughs than color of blue 15. And this is actually the A/B test that Google did. And they figured out, hey, well, you know what? Variation 30 is the one that gets the most click-throughs. So this is going to be now the color of blue we use for any link in Google Mail and in any other Google application. So this is what we call A/B testing. Another one is Canary releasing. And Canary releasing is mostly known, I think, from Netflix. A lot of other companies also use this, but I think Netflix is one of the ones with the best blogs around Canary releasing. And a Canary release is actually a kind of a technique to reduce the risk from deploying a new version into production. So it's not really something to do with testing. What happens here is, as you can see on my slide, we have a router load balancer, whatever you call it, and we're going to reroute most of our users to our production version 1.0. But we're also going to instantiate or spin up a baseline version, also version 1.0, on which we're going to reroute a few users. And we're also going to spin up a Canary release, which contains our 2.0 release. And also, of course, we're going to reroute a certain set of users to the Canary 2.0 release. We're going to capture metrics on all of these servers, and we're going to compare them. Netflix does this automatically. Most companies do this in kind of a manual way that people are looking at these metrics. And we're actually going to see that to figure out if our Canary release is not causing more problems than our baseline and is having the same conversion rates as a baseline. And if everything is green, if everything is okay, we're going to push our 2.0 to all of our servers. Now, the reason why I'm explaining this is because if your company is using this kind of release mechanisms, Canary releases, as testers, you also need to know this, and you also need to do some different kind of tests. Because in this case, it could be that we decide that Canary 2.0 is not a valid release and we're actually rolling it back. But that actually means that all of the data being created by our 2.0 release needs to be usable by our by our production releases. So this is really in making sure, in this case, we need to do some extra testing activities linked to, okay, can, for example, dossiers being created in the 2.0 version be treated in a 1.0 version? Is there no data problems when we're rolling back? Is everything still going to work? So we need to know this. And the same goes for feature toggling, for all kinds of experimentation methods. We need to know that we're going to use them so we can actually adapt or tweak our test strategy accordingly. Now, I think this is a mandatory slide for for any DevOps presentation. Which are the best tools out there? I think most of you have probably been waiting for this slide because most people think, okay, DevOps, it's purely a tooling aspect. So let's go to the magic slide of the best tools out there. But to be very honest, I don't care about which tool you're using because the best tool for a specific job is dependent on the context you're in. It's depending on your company, on your project, on the languages you're using. It depends on so many factors that I cannot tell you this is the best CI server out there. What I can tell you, and what is a problem in a lot of companies, is that I would love to see that all of these tools can be used on all of the platforms you have. Remember what I just told you about the APM solution being used in production. That would have been a great tool for developers because it allows you to, if you have a problem, it automatically shows you, okay, this is the button you clicked on, and this is what happens on your application server, on your web server. These are the SQL statements in the database. This is the pieces of code you're actually touching. You can do kind of a drill down in whatever happens when you click on a button or when you actually trigger a specific interface or web service. So this has a lot of value for developers. If we're creating automated graphic user interface tests and we're using them on dev, on test, on accept, why don't we use these on production to do some real user and user monitoring? If we run them on production to make sure that our production systems are actually working fine. And of course, we're not going to run all of our regression tests, only a small subset, but please also run them on production. And the same for all of these other tools we have in place. Just try to use them on as many platforms as possible because it will make our ROI better, but it will also give an awful lot of added value for everybody involved in this in the cycle. And again, another thing that will enhance is that if we all use the same kind of tools, by definition, there will be a better collaboration between dev, test, prod. So between dev, test, and operations. And by the way, I'm always telling DevOps, these days it's already biz, dev, sec, ops. Certainly, if you use the same tools, it will be easier to collaborate between development, security, operations, and testing. Because if, for example, if we're using Docker containers and we're pulling them in and security has a tool to actually scan them for vulnerabilities, this will make it more easy for everybody. So please use all of them on all of the environments you have. So what I've talked about in order to be able to survive, I think what I already explained, we need to adopt testing as a strategy and not a task. We need to embrace DevOps practices more. We need to make sure that we leverage production information and that we can use all of the tools we have on all of our platforms. Now, this actually all comes together in this one slide. And everything I've just explained, you should ultimately lead to what we call built-in quality. We should strive to ensure that quality is built into the application and that it's not an afterthought. And this is why I really love this quote by Edward Deming so much that I'm actually going to read it for you. And I practically never read any definitions or quotes, but this is really like a great one. And it says, inspection does not improve the quality nor guarantee quality. Inspection is too late. The quality, good or bad, is already in the product. Quality cannot be inspected into a product or service. It must be built in. And if there is one slide I hope you guys remember from this presentation, it's actually this one. Quality needs to be built in. And this is also a responsibility for us testers to make sure that everybody understands that it needs to be built in and that we can have a crucial role in building quality into a product. Now, to finish with, I started with telling you guys that testing is dead, or that Alberta Savoia told you that testing is dead. Well, in my personal opinion, thanks also to the DevOps movement and the Agile movement, I think that testing is actually alive and kicking. I think we are so needed and we will still be needed in the future. So thank you very much for your attention. This was the end of my presentation. So I think we still have some time for questions. So I will now switch back to the Q&A section. So allow me to see the questions. Okay, I can see some. Well, first question. I've heard a lot of times, testers, could you explain what is the difference from your point of view between testers and quality assurance engineers? Great question. It's true that there is a lot of debate and discussion going on. Is there a difference between testers and quality assurance engineering? For me personally, but that's my personal opinion, I do believe there is a difference between testing and quality assurance. First of all, depending on how you look at quality assurance is much broader than only testing, because quality assurance also goes into aspects of regulatory compliance, goes into aspects of validation, audits, and other things. If people look at quality assurance, meaning that we look at the definition of testing, but instead of being more an activity we do afterwards, we try to make sure that we embed testing, that we embed quality being baked into the product. Then for me, both of them are the same. So it really depends on what your definition of testing and quality assurance engineering is. For me, it's two different things. Quality assurance is broader and is going more into the realm of validation, regulatory compliance, making sure that we adhere to specific regulations, to specific procedures, while testing, we're pretty much looking more into detail in the software product we're actually creating. So another question I see here: how to empower collaboration when the team members are keep changing in the team? Yeah, that tend to be a little bit more difficult. If you continuously have new people coming in and coming out of the team, it tends to be more difficult. One of the ideas, and it's not always possible, but of DevOps is also to have like a stable team. Of course, if people leave your company and new people join, I think it's important there to make sure that the people that are remaining within the team can how you say it, can keep the fun up and running, because that's generally something that happens when people are actually going away, the fun drops, and people are actually demotivated because they see a lot of people leaving. So there are methods to improve this, but yeah, it's true, it's a bit more difficult. Wondering, devs are acting as they are doing a favor when talking to testers, maybe because of bringing coffee and cake each time when developer help is needed. Yeah, I hope we are a bit behind or getting behind these times where developers act as if they are superior to testers, and if we testers should be like happy if they even talk to us. I think an important piece of job there for us testers is to demonstrate to the developers that we are actually bringing value to them, that we are doing activities that make their lives easier. And I think it's important for us testers to also think about this, to think about, okay, what are like these small wins, these low-hanging fruit we can do to really make the life of our developers easier. And I know that don't get me wrong, we don't need to become the slaves of the developers, but if we try to do this, and if we do this well, and if developers if they notice that, hey, this guy has actually done something that's great for me, then I hope they will open up more and that the collaboration will actually happen automatically. So I think there's a lot of things we could also start complaining. We can start complaining, developers never talk to us, they never want to do something for us. I think if we take the mental shift and say, okay, we're going to do some stuff so that we can actually help them to improve the collaboration, that it will actually grow. And this is something important. Culture is something that needs to grow. It's not something you can impose top down. It's something that happens bottom up. I had some teams on which I had the most fantastic collaborations with devs. We were like the same. We went even too much. We went out practically every evening to celebrate whatever we did. But I also had teams in which it was really, really difficult. So it's also a cultural thing to actually make this better. What tools using for automatic crash report and create issues? Yeah, in this case, let me try to remember the name. For that specific company, it was a thing called Apples. It was something from, I think, legacy HP software. But anyway, there's tons of tools out there that actually do identically the same thing from different kind of vendors or even open source tools. But in that case, it was Apples. But doesn't matter. It's more the idea of what that kind of tools can actually help you with. Would you recommend a few books on the DevOps? Yeah, certainly. I think books, blogs, articles, experiences. If there's one thing I learned during my 20 years career on anything, is that reading a lot is helping so much. There are different kinds of books. You can go from technical books. Of course, you have like the Phoenix Project, Unicorn Project. These are more like novels explaining you the ideas behind DevOps and the possible solutions. It's great because it's not a technical book. You can read it like a novel. But next to this, you also have the DevOps handbooks, you have the Puppet Lab reports, you have the anti-fragility book, you have the CI/CD books from Martin Fowler. Well, just reading through my mind which books I've read. Lately, but I forgot the name. There's a great book about different team compositions in a DevOps culture, where they actually investigated, okay, in this kind of company, which kind of team composition between dev and ops and business and system teams could actually mean a lot. And that's also a great book, but I actually forgot the name. I think if you Google team composition DevOps, you will probably find that book out there somewhere. Now, looking at the timing, I actually committed to stop talking at this point. Now, I'm going to log into the Ask Me Anything. So beneath this presentation, there's like a big button, Ask Me Anything. If you guys still have questions, it's a Zoom meeting. Log in there. I can spend like the next hours to talk to you. If not, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you liked it and hope to be in Vilnius somewhere in the next years again. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.